I believe deeply in not deploying the U.S. military into American cities. We have law enforcement authorities. We have folks whose job it is to actually enforce the law within the United States. Those are police officers. Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress decided to withhold $1 billion in funding at the same time that this city could use that money to actually fund law enforcement, and instead opted to send military into our cities. I will never be okay or comfortable with the American military in American cities. That's not their job. Their job is to fight wars, foreign wars. What they can do in Fallujah is not what they should be doing.
But Brian, you may not feel comfortable, but other people might. If we could put this up here. So there was a Washington Post poll that found that 65% of district residents said crime was an extremely serious or very serious issue. That was up 9 points from the year prior. And if you add in moderately serious, that number rises to 95%. If you have this increased presence, and they are trained, generally speaking, to protect citizens. If that is going to make other people feel safe and people believe optics-wise or on the streets-wise that D.C. is not safe, why is that a bad thing?
Fund the police. That is their job. Not send in our war fighters who are normally dispatched into the Middle East to kill people. I mean, their job is to kill people, not to send those people into American cities. Again, we have people who do this in the United States of America. Even if they're just providing a support function?
Even if they're just providing a support function to local law enforcement?
Do you think that Republicans would be comfortable if former President Joe Biden would deploy the U.S. military into American cities if it were in red states? That's the point. It is not their job. It is not their job to be deployed into American cities. Why would we turn the U.S. military against American cities when we have police officers and law enforcement officials whose job it is? I'm not discounting the potency of crime in the United States. I live in Los Angeles. It's a big city. I, of course, want me and my family to be safe as well. And I understand that it's a major issue, but it's not the military's job to be able to do that. We have law enforcement whose job it is to counteract crime.
So let me bring in Geraldo. Geraldo, you like how I teed all that up? Because I'm very curious your response. Because the counter argument would be
very nice.
Yeah, and what you would hear from Brian, what you hear from others is, okay, look, right, they're not trained for this. The worst situation, people might make a Kent State comparison. This could end badly. Is this a push too far? You know, was this a rush to do this because it's an issue that really works well for President Trump? What's your response to that?
Well, my first and most important response comes from the Metropolitan Police Department themselves. You know, the 3,000 strong D.C. cops have embraced this emergency deployment, and they really, if anything, believe that it's late to the game. D.C. has been, with all due respect to our nation's capital, a shithole for a long time. You know, it reminds me of the old LaGuardia Airport you know, that became so ghettoized and so grim and dark and melancholy that you get used to it. Remember, these are citizen soldiers, the Guard. In broad strokes, I agree that the military should not be deployed for a law enforcement purpose. But these people, the Guard, the citizen soldiers, are there for a different reason. They're there to calm people down and to also project a presence. You see a couple of guardsmen, even if they don't have their long guns, and they don't, thank God, have them as they are deployed, they're there, or they're there in a support function. The cops and they are the same, on the same team. And I started covering homelessness in D.C. more than 35 years ago, a guy named Mitch Snyder. Mitch did everything he could to attract attention, even including a fast, where ultimately he almost killed himself because he went on a starvation fast. Because they wanted to get things done.
Right.
So jump cut 35 years forward, and if anything, it is worse than ever. It is tarnished.
So
it is.
Geraldo, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's interesting you say that. Well, first of all, let me just say, yeah, well, you know, LaGuardia now has a Bubby's, which is the best pancakes ever. So if D.C. can get that, maybe we're in the right direction. But now we go back to this. So talking about D.C., According to Gallup, there is a rising number of Americans who say there is less crime, not more. We've talked all week about what the stats really do say or don't say in D.C. That's been a battle. What do the stats say? So for those when you look at the numbers that are actually decreasing, and the question becomes, why now is it necessary to put forward federal law enforcement? Your response, Geraldo.
Well, I just think that it's in the order of things. He's had a lot on his plate. President Trump has. He's come, he has an incredible ability to spotlight an issue, to highlight it, and to really bring attention to it. And he came, maybe this was on his list, his to-do list. I don't know. All I know is that I believe the president is right to make this case. 200 people were killed in D.C. last year. 100 have been killed this year already. It's a relatively small city. 7 times the homicide rate of New York. Why is that?
Yeah,
How is it that we can't stop our own citizens from killing each other? A river of blood runs through this, the national parks and all the rest.
Geraldo, it was such a pressing issue that Donald Trump found it necessary to first figure out how to put up a flagpole on the White House grounds, to lay the plans for a $200 million ballroom, to host a bunch of crypto dinners, to release a cell phone plan and a crypto coin. All of those things were more pressing than the crime that was apparently so out of control in D.C. that we needed federal troops to be stationed there. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we have higher per capita crime rates, violent crime rates in cities like Little Rock, St. Louis, Memphis, Cleveland, Toledo. But of course, these are all red states, and so Donald Trump won't deploy the military there. But if crime is higher there,
well, you don't know that yet. I mean, you don't know that for sure yet, right, Brian?
I am in Cleveland as we speak. And the federal government still is in charge of our police department because of court orders, which I think is preventing our cops from doing the job that they want to do. And I deplore it in this town. I think it goes town by town. Washington's the 4th worst in terms of violence rate, along with St. Louis, Detroit, Memphis. Yeah. Washington, D.C. It's the nation's capital. It's the capital of the free world, and you're afraid to walk around because someone's going to kill you, rob you, rape you. And it took them 3 years to get the Black Lives Matter.
There are high murder rates in blue cities, too. And I'll tell you what, we can go back and forth about the crime and in different states. I don't think you're going to agree on this. I definitely know you're not going to agree on this next point, but I have to ask you both here. Okay, so Trump is now overseeing the Kennedy Center honors, okay? And the Smithsonian, he's going to be reviewing it. I'll start with you, Brian. What do you think the goal is here? Do you have an objection to what he's doing?
Look, do I have an objection to the President of the United States focusing on the Kennedy Center? I think that there are much more pressing issues than Donald Trump making himself the center of attention so that he can host an award show, like the fact that we have Americans who are going to have health care stripped away from them, who are going to have food assistance stripped away from them, who are watching a trade war make everything more expensive, watching inflation go up. And this guy, meanwhile, has been solely focused on the optics of opulence, of giving himself a ballroom, of making sure that he can increase his net worth with his crypto dinners, of not holding true to his promises of releasing the Epstein files, of making IVF free, of making prices go down, of making housing more affordable. Not focused on any of those things.
Brian, but you could say that couldn't you say the same thing about any president? One day looks different than the other day. I mean, Geraldo, look, so Brian says this is not something that really he should be focusing on, but your take is this might actually be beneficial to the American people. I mean, explain to us why it's important or why it might be good for Trump to oversee the Smithsonian review and see if it's in line with his vision, or who he will honor or who he is bestowing honors for the Kennedy Center.
From Harvard to Hollywood, President Trump is now putting his imprint on American life. He won the election decisively. Democrats like Brian, instead of getting on board and saying, we have to make a violent city safer is saying, well, maybe you should have done this first or that first, and military on the streets and so forth.
That's not what I'm saying.
It is
That's not what I'm saying, Geraldo.
example
I'm
of
saying
the
that
failure of the woke left. It's a classic
No,
example
Geraldo,
of the failure
I'm
of
saying
the
don't,
woke
I'm saying
left.
don't
to
deploy the
grant
U.S.
what
military.
people really want.
Geraldo, let's just hear what Brian has to say in response.
Geraldo, I'm not saying that. That has nothing to do with the woke left. This is saying don't deploy the U.S. military into American cities. And I'm sure if you asked most Americans, red and blue, left and right, and independents, whether they are comfortable with our troops being in American cities when we have police officers, that would make them deeply uncomfortable.
Let me ask you a question.
And if you ask Republicans,
you've said that. Hold it, Brian. You have said that a couple of times.
Let Geraldo jump in.
You have said a couple of times. You have said a couple of times you don't want troops deployed in American cities. I want to take you, Washington, D.C., late at night. You're in one of the ghetto neighborhoods or homeless street. Which do you want to see? You want to see that officer or the military guy who's not a cop, or you want to see the guy who's going to cut your throat? You have to recognize.
I'm not saying I don't.
When you have 100 dead people,
Geraldo,
when you have 100
I'm not
dead
saying
people,
I don't
that's
want
the
to see
reality.
any law
All right, now let me just.
I'm saying I don't want American troops on American soil.
Brian, just let Geraldo finish the point, and then I'll throw it to you.
On the Kennedy Center honors, I said from Harvard to Hollywood, Trump is going to do his thing. For many years, and I think that the Smithsonian, from everything I know about it, and the Kennedy Center, from everything I know about it, they run fine, and they have dignified, experienced people that have been selected over the years, and I have no problem with them, except it is logical to me, and it is my assumption that the winners of these various awards in the Kennedy Center over the decades have been from a certain segment of American life that does not include the MAGA people, the Tea Party people, or the others.
I hear what you're saying, right?
White working class people.
Yeah, opening it up to a different segment of the population. Because, like, if you look at political, you had Queen Latifah, Renee Fleming, Dionne Warwick, Billy Crystal. Okay, Brian, I want to throw it back to you because I know you don't want to talk about the Kennedy Center. But again, it goes back to the big issue here. You go back to this idea, and I still can't quite articulate it. The idea is not comfortable with troops in the cities. Okay, but I still don't understand the why. I still don't understand what the main concern is.
The concern with having American troops in American cities that are answerable to the commander-in-chief, who has been proven to abuse his powers. Mark Esper, Trump's own Secretary of Defense in his first term, had to deny Trump's request to shoot protesters in the leg. And so these people are accountable to the commander-in-chief, and he surrounds himself with people who abide by his orders. That's why we shouldn't have American troops in American cities. We have law enforcement to do the job that Geraldo is claiming he wants to see done. I'm not saying we shouldn't have any law enforcement in these cities.
I would just say to wrap things up, I think we're in the early stages of it. You've seen some arrests. Let's see where it happens. Let's see where it goes. Obviously, Trump is liking this and he wants to extend it. But I hear both of your perspectives, 100%. Brian Tyler Cohen, I get it. I 100% it. Geraldo Rivera, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to have you both here. Good spirited discussion from both of you. Thank you both.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.